Thank you for being here today. Actually, what I did is I had a few things that we will talk through a PowerPoint, and I'm going to try to. And the reason that I have that PowerPoint is because I'm a teacher. I can't function without a PowerPoint. So I'm going to go through those, and then after that, it's very casual. Please feel free to interrupt whenever you would like. And if you're one of these students, please take notes and feel free to ask questions, whatever. I have a notepad with me if you need some paper. And if you have any questions later on, I'm going to put my email up. I think I have my cards with me, so I can give my cards to you. If you have questions, you can email to me. So what we will do in the PowerPoint is just sort of briefly talk about some of the principles. And I'm assuming for most of the teachers, for all of the teachers, you will be familiar with these. I have these for the sake of actually students, but people who discuss it as we talk about it. So one thing that I noticed when we were at the science fair was that everything, the international one, everything had to be actually really step by step clarified. Every project that won an award had actually a very clear indication of how they followed the scientific method. So for the scientific method, what you do is you state a question and then you research the topic. Okay. You research the topic and then you state your hypotheses and then you do your experiments, analyze your results, draw your conclusions, and report your conclusions. So in actually your experiments, when you're doing your research project, you're going to be doing the same thing. You will actually want to follow me. The thing that I noticed in the projects is that when they had their actually project boards prepared, they wrote down everything clearly. They said, okay, here is the question, and here is the hypothesis. And what was interesting is that all of the judges actually had those papers in their hands, and they were putting check marks if it was included or not. So that's why you really want to, make sure that when you're preparing, you start with following the scientific method. Now, one of the things is picking a topic. Who here already picked a topic? So there's a few of you guys. Okay, well, you already are thinking about it and you picked the topic. Now, when I was at the science fair, at the International Science Fair, and I actually worked as a volunteered as an interpreter in the past years too, when the science fair was in Portland, Oregon. At that time I volunteered as an interpreter, and in this previous one, I was an interpreter also. Some of the projects, when I go there and started to talk with the students, trying to interpret their projects, they were just way over my head, and I have, multiple degrees. So there will be some students who will be coming with projects where they had a mentor from a university or from a school, from maybe a teacher from their school. So my strong recommendation is that if you are preparing a research project and my what you want to do is that you want to actually find your question, and once you have your question and you're happy with your question, you do want to go to someone who's been able to help you with that. Go to a teacher and work with the teacher when you're setting up your experiments, because really, in the science fairs, you're going to have some people who have already worked on it and over so many months, and they had professional help, as in someone who does experiments regularly. So you want your research to look professional. Now, one of the things about the choosing a topic, coming up with a topic, is that you want to find something. I think the most important thing is that you want to find something that is interesting to you, but also you want something that hasn't been already addressed so many times. So you don't want to find something from the web page, that a lot of people have been doing as a science fair project for years and given year. You do want to find something that will be interesting to you, and you do want to find something that's somewhat not novel. I actually, while doing a web page search, I actually found something. This web page, it talked about how you can pick a topic. Now, when you're picking your topic, and as I said, it's important that it should be something you like. Like my son is working on his research project, and he started in September. This is his second one, and his finish date is actually for the actual experiment December 6th. And then after that, he will have a month of analyzing the results. So he's investing 5 months of his life, and actually he finishes school. He comes here at 4 o'clock and he stays here until 6:30. He just told me a minute ago he's gone home now. Every day he's here, including Saturdays and Sundays, for 2.5 hours. So if he's going to do something like that, he wants to do something that will be interesting to him. So it's the same thing with you. If you are doing a research project, you want to find something you're not going to be bored with, so you're not going to be rushing it. You want to find something that you will enjoy doing so that you will spend time with it. Now, I found this web page. In this web page, you come over here, and I'm happy to give that address to you guys. I can email that to you. Now, you here put when is your project due, like let's say more than a month. What is your grade? Let's say you're a 10th grader. And you can pick, if you want to pick something in biological sciences, and I have no idea actually why they have the zip code. I went through this myself, but I don't know why they asked for that. You put your zip code, your gender, and then let's actually do this quickly. Okay. So it brings you to this page, and there's all these questions. It's asking you what kind of things you enjoy. Do you like gardening? Do you like animals? Do you like machines? Like those kind of questions. And then when I did this questionnaire and clicked submit, it gave me a list of projects that has been done before. So what you can do is you can go to those projects and find something. Do not repeat the project because it is something that's already been done, but think about how you can elaborate on that project. And I'm assuming this could be a useful tool for the teachers because you're going to have so many students who want to do a research project, and it's difficult to help them to be able to find topics. Maybe they can use a tool like this. Okay. So when you're preparing a science project, actually it is all about finding an answer to a question. And one thing that is important is that you want to find a question that is simple enough for you to answer. So you don't want a question that is just so vague and so vague that it's going to take you a long time to answer. And the simple experiments that you're able to do is not answering the question. That's not a good idea. You want to have something that is manageable and something that you can actually do some experimentation on. I saw this analogy somewhere and I thought that was interesting. How do people drive? There are a number of ways you can drive. One of them is you can just drive around randomly until you find the place that you want to go. We did that actually a couple of weekends ago. We were out of town. We needed to find a place to eat, so we got in the car, just sort of drove, and we ate whatever we found. So, but the other possibility is you can just find a map and look at the place, or you can go online and find out a little bit information about what is available. So you have actually a map in your hand, you have some ideas, and start with that. Then it is more purposeful. You're not just sort of, wandering and trying to find something. So, and if you notice that I get lost a lot because I'm looking at my map much. So, if you don't want to get lost in your project, let's start with some background research. Now, the background research is a collection of previously published and unpublished information. This may be something that's on the web, it's not being formally published, but finding some information that is about your topic, and it's the first step of a good investigation as well as a good paper. And when you actually compete at Intel Science Fair, you're going to have to write a paper. You're going to have to write a full paper. And when I was there, one thing that I noticed, they read every single line on those research projects. They look at every single signature. They actually go through all of those procedures, and if they notice anything that is not, looking right, there is actually a whole 3 days of interviewing. They call you and they interview you about what was wrong. Actually, there was one problem with my son's project when we were there. We had to call here and get the papers faxed there so that we could compete. They were disqualifying him. They disqualified people all the way from Indonesia. They disqualified a whole group from Minnesota because the paperwork was not complete. So you definitely want to be very careful when you're preparing your documentation and when you're writing them. And you do need to know if you're going to work with humans or if you're going to work with animals. You do need to make sure that your write-up includes information on experimenting with humans and with animals because it's a required topic. Your write-up needs to have something that you've learned about the care of animals or you learned about the internal review board requirements for working with humans. Okay, so when you're doing research, before you start to do your background research, you definitely want to identify some keywords about your research project, and those keywords will help you to find good information on, in the background research that has been done before. And you do want to ask good questions. You do want to come up with one question that is measurable and that is answerable through certain steps. You don't want a question that cannot be answered with the scientific method. And you're going to have lots of different sources. When you put the keywords, there's going to be lots of different sources. You do want to make sure that you're eliminating the sources that are not really reliable. Okay, so this is some of the things that is, a little bit about your process, in terms of process, what you're going to do. So you need to actually make sure, before we start with any questions, so quiet. I'm just so used to students talking back to me and interrupting. So, okay, so before you start your experiments, what you want to do is you want to have a good plan in your hand because there is nothing worse than being halfway through your experiment and realize that you're not going to be able to carry out the plan. So first thing is that you need to find out what kind of equipment you will need. Now you're in a very fortunate position because you have here Walker College, Commerce College, USC Upstate, and there are a lot of professors who are interested in outreach. So if you want to do an experiment that requires certain equipment, you might want to just call the departments in those universities and find out if they would be willing to let you use them for a few days or 50 hours, whatever. So that's actually a good idea to check with someone in terms of equipment that is not readily available to you, that you don't have in your school. Just check with the different institutions. And make a list of your materials you're going to need. Just go through them one by one and just write down and have a very detailed list. Because again, there's nothing worse than studying an experiment. You're going to measure the pH of different things, and then the kit you bought had only 20 strips, but you needed actually maybe 30. So make sure that you have all of those ready and you have a plan. You have a list of those in a very detailed manner. Something else that you're going to have to be really careful, and that is you have to run the experiments more than once. Most students in my classes, I require all my students to do a scientific method experiment in my introductory course. Currently, actually, I have 7 groups, and only one of them ran the experiment twice. And and they have a rubric that shows what they need to do. So I'm collecting their experiments and their reports on November 10th, and all of them will be really upset because they will lose really a lot of points for not repeating it. It's going to be the same thing with you. When the judges come there, their paper actually will have a part. It will ask, with the experiment, was there a replication of the experiment? So you do want to make sure that you have a large sample size, like if you're working with people or with animals, make sure that you recruit enough people to do the experiments. If you have only, you're doing something with dogs, if you have only 2 of them, that's not a good idea. Just go and talk with people. And in fact, actually, it's not a good idea to do experiments with pets because you're going to have a lot of variables you're not going to be able to control. So you do want to carefully think through those as well. You want to have minimum variables in your samples, and you want to have a large sample size. Think about where you're going to do your experiments. If you're working with people and it requires you to do something like you're going to measure their blood pressure, or you're going to look at blood glucose levels, or you're going to have them to solve puzzles. Whatever you're going to do, make sure that you have placed pet dog and it meets the requirements for your experiments. For example, if you're going to look at their blood sugar levels, make sure that all of them know that they shouldn't eat before they come to your experimental time. Or if you're going to do them something that will require them to pay attention, make sure that you have a quiet area set aside for them to do their experiments. And then also, help from an adult or adult supervision. Are you going to need it? If you need it, those adults, they will need to sign your paper. Make sure that that paperwork is done, and make sure that you talk with them and make an appointment before you start your experiment. And of course, anticipate problems like fire extinguishers, first aid, just have those kind of things ready just in case. We saw lots of very interesting experiments last year, both here and when we went to Untitled Fair. So let's make sure that you are prepared for the any questions? Okay. Now, after you do your experiments, you're going to have to interpret what's happening. And when you are interpreting them, what you need to do is actually, you do need to use a little bit the background research that you worked on, those experiments that are done before. Make sure you read those and you interpret results and draw conclusions in the context of the existing literature. Because one of the questions, when I was interpreting, one of the questions judges keep asking, where did you find this methodology? What kind of journals did you read about this? And who else did this experiment? What did they find? So make sure that you're discussing your conclusions and by using the existing literature. And what you want to do is you will summarize your results, and then you will use your results to support your conclusion and discuss it, again in the context of the existing literature. Please make sure that you do not try to prove or disprove a hypothesis. But the word that the scientists don't like is proving something. We don't ever prove something. Proof belongs to fields like mathematics or law. In chemistry, biology, we try to use the word supporting a hypothesis or rejecting a hypothesis. And this is something that actually I saw a few of the judges marking or putting notes on their papers when the students said, and I prove. So make sure that you're telling them your results supported your hypothesis. You did not prove that. And believe it or not, that was one of the mistakes my son did too. Like he just keeps saying that he proved there was a correlation. So make sure that you're not using that. When you're nervous, I think it's difficult sometimes to control what you're saying. And one other thing that is important is, just have a suggestion for the changes in your design or in your experimental process, so that they know it was not just something that you did for, a class or whatever, and then you're not really interested in it. They should see that you're thinking about it, you want to improve it, and you're interested in what else can be done about it. So maybe have some suggestions. Now you're going to have a notebook, and notebooks are required, especially in the international fair. You're going to have your notebook next to your research, and you will have to leave it there overnight because the day before the judging, all the judges will come and go through the projects one by one, and they will go through your notebook to make sure that all the data is there, or that there's no actually falsification of the data and stuff. So your notebook should be kept in pen. Make sure that you're writing with pen. somewhat well organized. You want to have a cover page, when you open the right book, your notebook, the first page is your cover page. It's going to have your name, your address, date, and title of your project, etc. And leave a few pages for the table of contents, and make sure that you number your notebook. So on the right upper corner, or wherever, if your notebook already does not have the numbers on it, just go through and number each of the pages so that the judges see that you didn't rip a page out when your results did not turn out the way that you expected them. And have a fourth part on overview of the project. Just write down what question you're investigating, and just write about, how did you become interested in this project. Give a little bit background and state your hypotheses. Those will be the things. When they come to talk with you, they will have only 15 minutes. It's like, the bell goes off, and they come there and they start to talk with you, and then there's another bell, and they have you. So there's very little time for them to talk with you. So if they can look at your notebook the night before and see all of that information, they are already prepared and they have the background, and you can interact with them better, and that gives you advantage. You want to have a portion that has your materials and put those on bullet points. Just write down everything you use. Then you're going to have a procedures part. That should be in full sentences. Do not do it like you're giving an order to an individual. Just make sure that just say things like 5 milliliters of saline solution was added to the plants. Just use full sentences. Don't say things like add 5 milliliters of saline to the plant. So just have a good detailed step-by-step write-up of your procedures. And write down all your observations. If you have pictures, make sure you put all your pictures. If you paste anything in your notebook, if you put a picture, when you paste it in your notebook, actually sign it, initial it in a way that half of your initial is on the picture and the other half is on the page, so that they know that has not been changed either. And when you go there, actually, what you will see is that U.S. Patent Office will be there, and they will be coming and talking with you to see if you want to get a patent for your research. So they are very careful about looking at notebooks and those kind of things to make sure that that was your data. There were no changes afterwards, so you want to be keeping a really good notebook. So again, have your conclusions, future research, applications. This is very important. Whatever you're doing, just tell them how it applies. Even if it seems like it's a very, very basic research project, one of the first things they ask is, how does it apply and why is it important? I have a little write-up about that. And just write an acknowledgement, even if it is acknowledging your parents for paying for the things that you bought, or acknowledging people, teachers who helped you, or acknowledging friends who volunteered to become subjects in your research, and write acknowledgement. And then you're going to have a part with the appendix part where you need to have all your science review committee forms, and if you work with people, you're going to have them to sign IRD letters or consent forms to make sure that you have those signed and attached in the back. If you don't have them, you will be disqualified automatically. Okay. Now, any questions about the experiments? I know that we're going really fast and it's fairly overwhelming, just talking about all of these, but do you have any questions? I think that the board design is probably the simplest one. I will talk about it a little bit, but if you want to talk about the experiments, maybe we can discuss those now.
Just to help the students that are here, there's a difference between what you're talking about, your notebook, and the research logbook. You're not talking about that, correct?
Research logbook should be the same thing as the notebook.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're saying that the whole research procedure should be in the logbook as well as the written report. And how are you going to, when you're talking about putting all your appendices information, the documentation, the paperwork, you can't put that in your research, not the one you can't tear pages out of, you record your data in.
Yes, that's right. So the appendix actually is an addition to it. It's not something that you're writing.
Mhm.
So appendix would be something written. And even for the other things, let's go back to the notebook part. Like here, you may have parts, like you may have graphs. You did some graphs. If you have those graphs, they can actually be pasted to your notebook. Now, I think there are different ways of doing the notebooks. What I've seen is, people actually had 3-ring binders like you have, and then they had notebooks that could, that had a 3-ring bunch, and they just placed it in there, and then they put the rest of the material in the back. The others actually had notebooks as a separate notebook for their research log, and then they had a folder for their IRB things. So there's I think there are different ways of doing that. But here, mainly, I'm talking about the research notebook. That's what it is. Any other questions?
Would you mind emailing our elementary schools?
Sure, yeah. You have the email address, right? Yeah.
Thank you.
And then I will also include that, idea page, that URL, if you guys want to use that. So actually, before we go to the posters, I would like to see if there's a great student here who will tell us what her or his research project is, and then maybe, the idea that they would like to do. And maybe we can talk about how you can set it up in a way that it could be a successful project. Anybody interested? How about one of the teachers? You guys have any projects that your students are working on? I don't want to put the students too much on the spot because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable. I tell my students too, there's no bad research ideas. It's just that, it's working it out in a way that it can be attractive.
I was going to say, at the elementary level, we're probably not as strict with it, but we're rethinking that for our fifth graders. It might be a good idea to start them, to do some of the things, the research book and the explanation about how they became interested, just to add a little bit of those things to it, beginning for fifth grade.
And are they doing projects like with plants, animals, chemicals?
They have before. Usually they don't start working on them until after Christmas, and our science fair is early February. And then so in January they're all doing a lot of the projects that we find for them are ones that can be done over a weekend as a family activity. That just seems to work. But yeah, they've done things with plants, not so much animals. Still things with people or health related things. I noticed that they're into chemistry, as it's some practical things in the environment, so suds and different things,
Right, yeah.
Things that are easily attained.
Yeah. I actually judge science fairs and School for the Deaf and Blind, and their elementary students do a lot of environmental related things, and also plants, a lot of plants. Anybody interested in a research project? They would like to work through some details? Go on. No? Well, okay, let me tell you one of the research projects that my students are doing for my class now. Now, actually, we have a number of them, that we're interesting, but one of them is fairly simple. It could be repeated many times, and it's not expensive. And what they decided to do is, and of course, these are the experiments students have to complete within a few weeks. So they decided, one of them is very health conscious, that she really likes to eat healthy things. So she actually said that she thinks whole grains are better than, processed food. So then she hypothesized that if that is the case, that means in whole grain bread, she should find more protein, less sugar, and less fat. So she was counting all her molecules and maybe, less starch. That's what she was thinking. So they went and bought whole grain bread, white bread, and potato bread, oat bread, lots of different types of bread. And they are going to test this. Now, what do you think would make this a successful project? What are some of the things that they really need to pay attention? Can you speak up? So they need to test the protein in each bread. That will be, so they need to actually have whatever they are testing, it needs to be tested in each of the bread kind they are using. How about things like, so if they are testing the bread, from one bread, if they take a part and then a piece from the second bread, they take another piece. If those pieces are not equal to one another in terms of their weight or size, what they are finding is not going to be actually comparable. So what they will have to do is they are going to have to actually take their bread and make sure that the amount of grain they are measuring is equal in each of the breads. Does that make sense? Because potato bread actually is heavier, the same size potato bread will be heavier than the wheat bread they are testing. So that's something that they will have to be careful. Or the water content of the breads will be different, right? So what they have to do is they have to take their bread and weigh it before they start the experiment. They weigh it the same size of bread, and then they left it in an oven overnight so that all the water would be evaporated, and then they weigh it again. And they compared how much water was there, and they were able to make some statements about that. And then those dry bread that lost all its water now, they actually cut pieces of it and they got the same amount of grain from those bread or same amount of actual bread material. They ground it and then they tested for each of the materials. They tested for protein, and those are really simple procedures actually. You don't really need fancy equipment. They were able to test it and they found that the only thing that is different, they had the same amount of starch, same amount of fat, and same amount of sugar. The only thing, or in terms of sugar, monosaccharides, they had the same amount. The only thing that was different was protein content. And the whole wheat bread had a lot more protein in it. So I think like simple things, simple projects like this, we want to think carefully to make sure that there are not too many variables, for example, the water content. Any projects that you guys would like to go through?
Well, let me suggest one. I'll be a blind man.
Okay.
I would think you could take different water sources and test them for what that would be very revealing.
Yeah, actually, that would be very interesting. You could, what you could do with that is you could actually go to a pet store and get an aquarium kit, and then just go and collect water from, perhaps lakes versus rivers, or you could do something like different locations, and you could test those there. Maybe you could look at things like, go to different locations, different lakes in the region, and check their dissolved oxygen content. Because in South Carolina, we have a lot of lakes that are heavily polluted. So if you were to go and look at areas like Greenville, some of the lakes in Greenville or these areas, that would be very interesting, actually.
And one other one that I think we all remember, there was a child, he was the son of a veterinarian, and he took pictures, and he put them, he went around and took a swab throughout the elementary school, like in the bathroom, the sinks, closets, the lockers, the bleachers where the kids sit in the morning at the holding center, all kinds of places in hands, and found out which was doing something where germs on it. And I think the bleach was one, and then there was shoes, And you think the bathroom will be dirty, but those were the cleanest because everybody's washing their hands. So that was interesting and kind of disgusting at the same time. This was out of school, but I think it was an easy one to do.
Yeah. Yeah, we had last year there was a project at the science fair that one student actually went around and tested the toilet seats from the girls' bathroom versus the boys' bathroom to see which one was dirtier. So, it's like, oh, so the results were interesting, but we won't discuss that. Okay, well then let's talk about posters. I guess not everybody is going to be comfortable to share it now. Right, so the poster boards. So the poster boards actually are extremely important. We want your poster boards to look really good. And today I was just looking online to see some examples of bad posters. Unfortunately, it turns out that everybody puts the good posters online. They don't put the bad posters. So I wasn't able to find any. So what you want is that in your poster, okay, so the first thing is that when you are preparing for the science fair, prepare as if you're going to go to the international. Don't prepare yet like you're just doing a class presentation. Because if you do that, if you win, then you're going to have to prepare it again anyway. And if you prepare a professional poster, that is going to help you to win anyway, because a well-presented poster makes a really big impression. Now, one thing that we found out last year is that because we actually had a poster that my son had to put it on the board, on the wall, and we found out that that is not acceptable at the International Science Fair. You have to have a poster that stands. You have to have some sort of stand. So we actually had to redo this poster. In fact, we had to redo it twice. So you're going to, my recommendation is you can actually take one of those tripod poster boards. That's one possibility. Or when we were at the International Fair, we saw that students got their posters printed at Kinko's, but then they had a poster stand that is good, they could put it on a table. So you don't want a poster that is on the wall because you will end up have to find something to have it stand. Now, for your posters, you don't want everything to be in your poster. You just want to emphasize just really the important points that that will give the essence of your project to the people visiting. And you want to explain the complicated things so that people know what they are. They understand your project. You don't want to use the big words and not have any explanation. Even though people coming to your stands, they will be knowledgeable about the topic, you still want some explanation on those. You want it to look professional, so if you need to cut and paste things, make sure that you use a paper cutter so you don't have like crooked lines. And don't make it too tall. Some people actually put two poster boards on the top of each other. So in order to see that, you really have to lift your head to look at it. So it didn't look really good. It wasn't easy to read. So don't make it too tall or don't make it too deep. Most people who are coming there are older in age, so their eyes are not as sharp as yours, so they have to just really, get closer. So you do want to have a really good, actually, presentation that when your poster is ready there, people don't have to be too close or don't have to look up, and they can read it easily from 6 feet distance. And you don't want to put too much information. If there's too much information, people don't feel like reading it. So you want to keep the information to a good level. Now, the fonts are very important. Make sure that you have at least 16 points in terms of fonts. And anything smaller than that is hard to read. Actually, when I have my students prepare posters, I have them to prepare something larger. I actually have them to print, one page and put it on the poster board and measure 6 feet, and then stand there and ask them, can you read it easily? So it's important that you're using large fonts. And try to use the traditional fonts that are clean and easy to read. So don't try to use don't use fancy ones. They look nice, but it's difficult to read. You want to make the reading really easy to the people who are visiting your courses. So if you're going to use italics or bold, don't use it all the time. Make sure that you're using it to emphasize something. Like if you're, and you can use color for that too. If you're going to say something and there's something, a word that is important in the sentence, you can use either bold or italic or use color for those ones. But do not do your whole text in italic or bold. When you're using pictures, do not place something on the picture. Don't put your text on the picture. It makes it difficult to read. The general rule is that if you have a picture here, if the picture is a graph or a photo or a drawing, it needs to be labeled at the bottom. Just make sure that whatever you're going to say, just say it at the bottom. And if it is a table, that needs to go on the top. And tables are called tables. So in your poster, if you have poster tables, you're going to go table 1, table 2, table 3. If you have graphs, figures, charts, they all are called figures. If something, if some sort of image is not a table, you want to call them figures, and then you want to label them figure 1, 2, 3. They need to go in order. And as I said, the table is the only one that will have the legend on the top. Of course, for the pictures, you saw it already in the package, I'm assuming. You cannot use the pictures of people unless you have permission from them. If it is your picture, you can use it, but otherwise you're not supposed to use pictures. If you're using an animal picture, if you're doing a testing with an animal, unless the picture was in the natural habitat of the animal, it is not acceptable to use that. So if you were doing a dissection, if you were performing a surgery, if you were doing some sort of testing, you cannot use your animal's pictures. So make sure that you're, with the animal pictures and stuff, make sure you're following the guidelines from the science review board. Don't use all caps. It's harder to read. I've heard people saying that when they go to Facebook, if people have their status updates in caps, they don't read it. It's harder to read. And don't use artistic fonts. Notice that they are really difficult to read too. So, and do not use too many different fonts. What you may want to do is use something for all the heading, and then for the body, use a different font. But do not go any more than two. Two fonts should be, two different fonts is fine. So these are some nice projects, actually. Some good science fair projects. Notice the colors, they use the colors really well. And it looks like actually they have some sort of color coding. Notice that the results are in this reddish mapping, and then the conclusions are in pink. I have no clue why that figure is there. I think it should be over there. But as I said, we got these from the internet, so I don't know what to stand for. And then the procedures are in green, and they have their hypotheses. There's a color coding going, and you can, your eye easily and smoothly can follow it. One of the things that is really nice when you're preparing a poster is have these columns, and what works the best is having one column here set aside for introduction and a little bit background information. And then right over here, and in fact, actually, if it is not too long, you can have your procedures right here. And in the middle, you can have either on the top your procedures and at the bottom your results section, or if you have so many results, you can have your results in the middle altogether. And then conclusion and future work can be in the next column. Now, make sure that you're utilizing the colors well. Yes, I remember actually what I was going to say. When you look at a science project, or when you look at a data, it is a lot easier to read the graphs when compared to tables. So if you can, make sure that you are using, graphs, not the pivot table, because tables are difficult to interpret, especially when you're standing there and trying to understand what it is saying. But the graphs can actually really nicely summarize the situation. And if you're using graphs, make sure that you use correct type of graph for your data. If you're going to use percentages, you can show it in a pie graph. But if you're comparing things, if you're making a correlation, then you may want to have, for correlations, you will have a line. Or for comparisons, you might want to have a bar graph. Make sure that you're not using the incorrect type of graphs when you're expressing your data. Any questions about, what's on the poster? I have another poster here, actually. This is interesting too. So they have a blooming algae project, and they have actually, they utilize also color coding, and it's nicely and professionally done. And that's a nice one. And I will show one here. And it is easier to read. The fonts are big, so you can easily read it. This one over here, on the other hand, it's a little bit deeper than the traditional one. And if you look at it, they have, I see that it's really actually not so you can't really see it well. But the font is really small, so it's really difficult to read. And it just seems a little bit chaotic because we have just so many little things in there, so it's just a little difficult to follow when compared to the other ones. And it's the same thing here. If you notice here, look at over here. All the way through, it is typed material and really small font, and it's really difficult to read it. And nobody will want to stand there and read that 3-4 pages of information. So that's why I think it's important that you want to carefully think about your poster before you start to put it together. Things about your poster also, you do not want to put any logos or let's say you wanted to compare different fast food stores. You cannot identify them in any way. Or don't put your school logo. That's some of the requirements, and that will be in the package. That is in the package for the And of course, you're going to have to prepare for the judges because they will come there, they won't have a lot of time, and you will be extremely nervous. So practice actually is important. Practice, practice, practice. Practice with your friends. One thing that I really liked when we went there was a school that came with or actually not a school, but a region that came with some 10 to 15 students. Every day they did this. They took about 10 minutes and sat with one student and discussed it, and then moved to the next student, and then the next student. They were practicing constantly, and the judging was not until the 4th day. They were able to practice for 4 days. So if you're coming from the same school before the regional meeting, make sure that you have your posters at school and get together with your friends and have them ask you questions, and you ask them questions. Practice is the best thing that will prepare you for judging. Now, you should prepare a short speech, and you can communicate. You should be prepared to communicate everything in 2 to 5 minutes, because the judge will plan on spending 15 minutes with you. So he will come over there, or she will come over there, quickly scan the project. That will take a few minutes, and then we'll ask you to tell me about your project. So you should be able to give them the summary of your project in 2 to 5 minutes. And you definitely want to explain the theory behind it. And then after that, they are going to start to ask you questions. And some questions may be relating to you personally, because some of the awards are given for, they are special awards, and they do not only, judge the project, but they judge the student. Like, for example, they ask, so what do you want to do when you graduate? Because there were certain schools they were giving scholarships. So, like, there was one school that was in full scholarship for their psychology program. So if you tell them, oh, I'm interested in chemistry, they will just move on to the next project. So they may be asking you questions about you, so be prepared to talk about yourself. And whatever you say, with everything, you want to look professional. And just think about the questions the judges may ask you, prepare to answer those. And then prepare to explain the things in simple terms, because some people will not be familiar with your project. Now, make sure that you dress nice, because that says a lot about how much you care for the project. If you don't care for the project a lot, the judge will not care either. So you want to dress nicely and show them you care. I mean, no jeans. I tell people I got my PhD so that I could wear jeans whenever I want. I go to class always with my jeans. I like casual clothing, but you do want to be in a nice dress for the judging. And use your board when you're explaining your project. Last year, I don't know if you all remember this, but my son had his pointer. He was just standing there, and with the pointer, he would show what the figures meant and stuff, and he just looked very professional. And I think it would be nice for all of you guys, when you stand in front of your project, for the judges to see you cared for the project, and being able to use the diagrams and being able to explain the project. Be positive and enthusiastic, and be confident with your answers. If you don't know something, don't make it up. Just say, oh, I didn't think about that. Maybe I should, look it up. Because that also shows enthusiasm. And also treat each person who is coming to your project as if they were a judge, even if they weren't a judge. When we were in California, there was a public day. So students stood next to their project and they were talking about it. And I noticed that some students were just sitting there and they couldn't care less. And there were others, they just seemed very enthusiastic. They were talking with the elementary school students the same way they talked with the judges. And that looked very professional, actually. Right, well, that's all I have. So if you guys have any questions, I will be happy to answer them. And I can talk forever, so don't let me just stand here, because I'll just start to talk and we'll be here until the morning. I know your teachers, if it would work out, and if you guys would like me to come and talk with your students when you're preparing posters and stuff, like you bring sample posters, I'm happy to come if you guys want to. The same thing with you guys. As I said, I judge middle school and elementary school projects, but for some reason for this, my mind was all high school, Intel. That's what I had in mind when I was preparing.
We do have one final question. We mentioned not to use any brand logos. So suppose children were comparing, like Coke or Pepsi, for example. Would they just say salt free number 1 and salt free number 2?
Yeah. Now, because the elementary school students do not go to the science fair, to Intel Science Fair, for them it may not be problematic. But if the high school students, if they will be going there, once they are there, actually, they come and put tape over those kind of things. And my son had his school's logo, so they came and covered those. There was one student who had, she did a research project on comparing different types of diets on learning of rats. So she was comparing a nutty diet versus McDonald's. And so she had the McDonald's logo, so they came and just put, something over it. They cover it. They are very strict, actually. And I said in front of the science review board, and I had to answer questions for about 2 hours almost. They would let us go, and then they would pull us back, and we would go back again. So they are very strict about it. But it is mainly concerned for the high school students. Now, I'm going to tell you guys very briefly about the science review board. So if you're a high school student, especially, you do want to make sure that you complete all the procedures when you are, you want to make sure that Dr. Bradley is actually also in science review committee. I am in science review committee. So if you're working with humans or with animals, make sure that you write a letter and explaining, you write your experimental design and then send it to us and ask for the approval. And it will take us just a few days to communicate, read through your experimental design, and then we will send it back to you. And if there's a need for changes, we're going to tell you, how it needs to change. But otherwise, we'll give you the approval so you can start your experiments. You're not supposed to start your experiments until you get approval from the science review. And if you're going to work with animals and human, you have to get approval. If you're going to work with bacteria that could be infectious, then you need to have a lab supervision. But you don't have to have individual approval for that. And again, if you're working with animals, make sure that your experimental design has at least one reference that is about experimenting with animals. You could go and look at on the web page of NIH. They have something on their IA book, Institutional Animal Care Treaties, so you can read those and you can include those there and just say something like, I've read and understood the issues involved working with animals, and then you can just put the name of the reference. Questions?
You make sure I'm understood. You said that you have to have scientific review board approval. That's for any project or just for the projects that involve living things?
Projects that involve vertebrate animals and humans. Okay. So if they were going to work with bugs, it doesn't matter. But if they were going to work with rats or mice or fish, then actually they're going to have the approval. If it is infectious organisms, like if they are working with bacteria, then they will have to have a drug supervision, but they don't have to take permission. And that permission has to be before they start the experiment. Other questions? Okay, then I'll be quiet.
Well, thank you very much. It's great information. Thank you.
Want to talk? Email, comment, or whatever. Just come over and do it here.
Oh, okay. All right. You're going to make sure you get this card. Okay.
If you would like a card, I have my cards
please.
here.
Thank you.
Sure.